Part 2 of correcting Kent Hovind's lies on tax crimes. Let's make a start.
All those transcripts were finally delivered to Kent 4 months past beyond the deadline of appeal. That's only half of it. 2 juries were dismissed until the guilty verdict was made.
Well, really, in that case, if 2 juries were dismissed, there were in fact 3 trials because you had to be heard found guilty on a 3rd trial. That just simply wasn't true, Kent. You know you're lying again. Also, you did appeal, and in your appeal, you argued that you were not in fact guilty of structuring because the law doesn't penalize transactions of less than 10,000. Well, the Court of Appeals wasn't impressed, given that the plain language of the structuring law does in fact penalize transactions of less than 10,000 when it's done for that purpose. And ultimately, the Court of Appeals upheld your conviction and sentence. So, let's carry on even further.
They refused to find me guilty. She called another jury. They refused to find me guilty. Called a 3rd jury. Finally found me guilty. It's been moved from prison 23 times.
It would be good to see the documents on that case, on those claims that you're making, Kent. You could easily produce them.
In 8 years. By the time I was done, they'd moved me 32 times, okay? Some say they're trying to get him killed because the more you move a prisoner, the more likely they are to share a cell with a violent inmate. Allegedly, IRS agent Scott Schneider seized over $42,000 from the Creation Ministry safe and then created a tax bill for the exact amount of money seized. He made my wife open the safe. There was $42,000 in there. We had like 30 people working in the ministry, all kinds of things, money going in and out with legitimate church expenses.
Oh, rubbish. That amount of money, you were hiding it, Kent. You didn't want to pay your taxes. You didn't want to pay your payroll taxes, and you structured to avoid it. And I've explained what structuring is, and you were guilty.
He counted up the money, $42,000 and something, made up a tax bill for that exact amount, and then seized the money. Didn't you, Scott? Judge Rogers has a track record of handing out unjust and outrageous rulings against Bible believers. She issued a contempt order against 2 school teachers for praying before eating their food. Washington Times reported that over 60 congressmen stepped in to show.
He's repeating this from before, and the fact that what they were on trial for was breaching the agreement of a lawsuit that they had reached. So they signed up, there was this agreement which was settled, and then they breached it. That's what they were being charged for, not praying before eating their food, Kent. Pretty obvious, and of course that's the bit you didn't read out before.
Teachers who are facing jail time. And the judge was completely out of line, ruling against the First Amendment constitutional rights. She ought to have been dismissed as a judge at that point, but the case got settled out of court and the judge is still in office. Outrageous. The same Judge Margaret Casey Rogers, who allegedly misdirected the jury on the first trial, seems to have delayed the paperwork to stop the appeal and may have ordered the tampering with court transcripts. And she's been selected to be the new judge in the upcoming trial.
This is grossly defamatory, Kent. I hope Rogers gets to see what you've done here and sues your ass off.
You can do what's called a writ of coram nobis, okay? The writ of coram nobis is Latin to the court at the time of judgment. The writ of coram nobis is intended to correct a final judgment by the same court in which it was rendered by redressing a fundamental error. So we've got some people who are in the know legally, who are willing to do. They said, but it'll take a long time.
Your legal advisors have a history of failure, Kent. One thing after the other, and of course your ludicrous $500 million lawsuit or thereabouts against the government, and all the time you're just about to win, you're just about to, and it doesn't happen, because these guys are not proper lawyers, Kent. One of them is your Brady Byram, the one who's very fond of his own kids, let's say.
It cost about $6,000 to file a writ of coram nobis. If you can raise the money, we'll do it for you. We love your ministry. We want to help. This can get the case overturned at the start, as if it never happened. But then the judges know, that opens a whole bunch of doors, doesn't it? Yeah, sure does.
No, it's right. He's exhausted all his appeals, and the Supreme Court declined to intervene either. I'm sorry, But that's just the case. Kent, tell the truth for once.
Uh-huh. I devote my time to preaching and teaching God's word. I don't waste time on corrupt politics. But if you want to help the legal team file one, let me know, okay?
Yeah, waste more of your money, give more of your money to Dino Landfrom to piss against the wall. God.
A coordinated effort between the police force who summoned the SWAT team, the IRS agents who invented tax bills, the prosecutor who was a convicted felon, and the judge with a track record of issuing heavy-handed anti-Christian rulings requires Congress to investigate. Because
So more misleading stuff. So at the time that this prosecutor, the one who had a minor role in the case, he wasn't a convicted felon at the time. Sure, he did dreadful things to children afterwards. But remember Kent's good friend Chris Jones and what he got up to and was convicted of with young boys? The one that Kent welcomed to Dino Land? Remember Brady Byram, who Kent said was guilty and then sort of said wasn't guilty and then said was guilty again? It's all there. All the evidence is there. So, if you're going to live in a glass house, you shouldn't be throwing stones, Kent, about that sort of thing. All that is irrelevant to the case and the fact that he was guilty.
Safe, okay. The in-prison industrial complex. They can hold stock in private prisons for profit. Judges are incentivized to hand out longer sentences. Did you know that? A judge can own stock in the prison. So the longer they lock you up, the more money they make on their secondary investment.
Yeah, does this judge own stock in a prison? Come on, Kent. Does this judge? No, the answer is no. If she does, you go and put down the evidence for it, instead of all these red herrings and straw man arguments, which you are so notorious for.
Sounds a little off, doesn't it? While prisons are full, the companies that run those prisons will be in profit. An invested judge will take a dividend of that profit. It's a conflict of interest for a judge to profit from handing out longer sentences, and they ought to be banned from investing in prison-related stock. I agree. I didn't write this, by the way. I'm just reading what somebody else wrote about my case.
Oh, yes, yeah, one of your own people wrote about your case. All this stuff, you notice Kent is not giving sources for all this because it's his own people. And then he's right. It's a circular argument. And then he's writing that he's innocent because his own people say he's innocent. It's just a nonsense.
An internet petition with 19,000 signatures to free Kent Hovind was removed from the internet. We know who has the petition, but he won't release it. Update. We tracked it down, and we'll update it on this website soon. Link to the petition can be found here. 19,000 people signed a petition to review my case and get me out, and all of a sudden it disappears off the internet.
Well, as you're often saying, the cases aren't decided by majority, Kent. It's not a matter of public opinion, whether you're guilty or not. It's a matter of fact, court record, and a jury deciding. That's the truth of this matter, Kent. It's not a popularity contest, because if that was the case, I'm sure we could drum up more than that number of signatures to have you imprisoned again. And of course, that would be just as wrong. I would never do that. But this is the argument that you're making. A really silly argument, Kent, and you know it.
Number one mind-blowing thing that happened to Kent Hovind is he now faces another 100 years in prison. The new trial set for February 9, 2015. The trial could be moved to March. What crime has he committed that deserves that sort of lengthy sentence? He mailed a Liz pendants on the title of his property. The government appears to be selling off the assets, and his property is still in dispute. A Liz pendants informs the buyer that there's still a legal dispute over the house.
Yes, so this was done to try and intimidate people who might potentially want to buy the property. The government was selling off the property to get some of the money back for the taxes he owed. Of course, it was Eric who eventually bought quite a few. That's his son, a strange son, because, Kent doesn't get on with his family. He bought some of those properties, and that actually saved them in a way, at least for the family. But Kent, of course, he wants everything for himself. Not that he owns anything, of course. Of course not.
Once again, they've made a ridiculous crime of mail fraud to unjustly have him jailed the rest of his life. We were disputing the government's right to seize church ministry property for my alleged crimes. And so we filed a lis pendens, perfectly legal. They said that's mail fraud, to use the mail to file this fraudulent document. I'm locked up in jail. How would you like me to deliver it?
Well, as it happened, I think one juror disagreed and you did not get convicted of that. I think you'll probably find that Kent was the subject for all this because in prison he was a prat. Before the judge, he was a prat. Before those investigating the case, he was a prat. Just a horrible person. And of course, when people are horrible, they get stiffer sentences.
The anti-Christian bias Judge Margaret Casey Rogers, who said creation evangelists committed a crime worse than rape.
Once again, no source for this. This is his own people writing this. It's just unbelievable drivel that anybody would believe it. And of course, Kent won't give the source.
Is on notice. Detractors have called Kent Hovind a liar over claims Judge Rogers purposely altered court transcripts to hide her anti-Christian bias and illegal actions. We have proof. Judge Rogers' worse than rape claim is true. I heard it. 8 other people heard it. They signed affidavits. She said it.
Well, you said it was the whole courtroom before. I mean, how many people were in the courtroom? Other court officials, other reliable people, you know, not just your minions. Of course, they're going to say that because you and your minions are obviously find it easy to lie because once saved, always saved, and you're going to go to heaven anyway, so you think.
It's not in the transcript. She should be impeached immediately. Kent Hovind should be a free man with a clean record. It seems the IRS, DOJ, and public school system do not have a problem hiring mentally unstable sexual deviants who thirst for lust. Check out the story behind the sexual deviants and pedophiles who imprisoned Pastor Hovind.
This is just nonsense. It's just nonsense. It has nothing to do with it. And if you want to talk about these deviants and pedos, then you talk about your own friend Chris Jones, who's welcome at DAL anytime, and your other board member Brady Byram, who's written some of this legal stuff. Have a look and see what you've said about those in an unguarded moment, Kent.
Seems that nepotist bureaucrats enjoy appointing judges to positions of power who can't distinguish the line between justice, rape, and law. Seems like Judge Rogers has set the precedent for judges to hand out 30 days to rapists and 10 years to preachers who teach people that they are not an animal but a child of God. That's the average.
Totally irrelevant to the case. Just totally. This is typical of Kent Hovind, and you can find it. I've different questions, and when he gets cornered, he changes the topic. And he introduces red herrings. This is Kent Hovind 101.
Sentencing length. This is from the U.S. Department of Justice. I got 101 months was my prison sentence. Rapists get 96 months. Robbery gets 83 months. Aggravated assault, 54 months. Burglary, 53. Drug trafficking, 51. Weapons offenses, 43. Fraud, 39. Really, what was my crime? IRS finally admits and will enforce policing churches and imprisoning what they deem as political dissidents, just like Hitler did, the Gestapo, and Nazi Germany.
Once again, this has come from Kent's friends writing this nonsense. But if you want to know, this is when he was convicted before sentencing, a pre-sentence report was prepared. And that document gathered the first 12 counts of his indictment, that's the failure to withhold, into one group. The next 44 counts, that is all but one of the structuring counts, into a second group. And the second group provided the steeper sentence under the federal sentencing guidelines, indicating a sentence between 97 and 121 months. The court sentenced him to 120 months, and it was the higher end because of his not cooperative and threatening attitude. So that's the fact, not what you're seeing up here.
Prosecuting Kent Hovind, criminals beware. America, wake up. Pamela C. Marsh and Tiffany Eggers silenced jury and evidence. They were also involved against me. New prosecutor Ryan Love, protected violent felon who was employed by the ATF, now prosecuting Kent Hovind. Here's a timeline of events. You can read all that some other time, okay? So what is structuring anyway? Also known as smurfing, is the practice of breaking up a large financial transaction into smaller transactions to avoid scrutiny by regulators and law enforcement. So if a drug dealer has $100,000 he wants to deposit, the bank is required to fill out a form if they go over 10,000. So the drug dealers break up their large amount into smaller amounts. The smaller transactions are executed in an amount below some statutory limit that normally does not require a financial institution to file a report. Federal structuring laws are smurfing ridiculous. Most structuring cases stem from a 1970 law called the Bank Secrecy Act, which requires banks to report any deposits, withdrawals, or transfers more than $10,000. The law has since been revised several times, but generally it's intended to make it easier for the government to track tax cheats, money launderers, illegal gambling operations, and other criminal enterprises. What do we mean by structuring? A person deliberately splits a large financial transaction into smaller transactions. Oh, listen, we never had a large transaction to split up. We were withdrawing lawfully earned ministry funds once every 2 weeks to pay legitimate ministry expenses. There was no structuring. The jury saw that twice and refused to convict. Had to convene a third jury, didn't you?
There were not 3 trials. And if there were, come on, produce the evidence for that, Kent. This is something you're just making up. Now, you were structuring. The indictment laid out 45 withdrawals between July the 20th, 2001 and August the 9th, 2002. Through to November the 2nd, 2001, each withdrawal is for $9,500. After that, it's for $9,600. The withdrawals initially happened every 3 days, but they're never more than about a month apart. There was also a witness and former employee of yours, Kent, who testified that you knew of and complained about the reporting requirements. So there's very good evidence that you, Kent, deliberately structured your withdrawals to avoid these filing requirements. It's clear. The evidence is clear.
I've had several lawyers and paralegals examine my case to see if I broke any laws.
Well, of course your lawyer's going to say that you didn't break any law. That's what a lawyer does. That's what you hire. Paralegals, well, they're all people who've had no success to speak of whatsoever, including this horrible Brady Byram, who by your own comments about people who are deviants should be somehow disbarred from your case if these other guys are too. This is just nonsense, Kent. You get caught out everything you try and do because you're not truthful.
If I did, I would quickly admit it. My charges fall into 3 categories. Here they are. Here's a summary. First, counts of false charges of failing to withhold taxes from workers. They charged me with failing from withholding taxes and also charged me with withholding it and failing to pay it over. Which was it? Did I not withhold it or did I withhold it and not pay it? My lawyer never caught that.
It's no big deal either way, Kent. You didn't withhold it, and of course, once you hadn't withheld it, you couldn't pay it over. But of course, there is a possibility that you did withhold some and never paid that either, in which case you were cheating your employees. It doesn't really matter. Either way, you were not following the law. Okay, we're going to leave this there for the next part. Kent Hovind, you're totally guilty. Totally.